So what if somebody walks into the Sallyport in Pontefract Castle and finds a severed head swinging in the wind? What happens next?
Because we all read these stories in the news because every day there's something, and I'm sure we all wonder, how has that happened? How was someone thought to do that?
We all like to try and solve a problem, and the crime fiction gives us an opportunity to get into a world that hopefully none of us ever experience in real life.
Well, first of all, welcome to today's sessions of Books and Beverages. For those who don't know us, we are a collective of authors, and we like to bring authors to audiences, so you get to meet your authors and they can tell you about their books. We have all sorts of different things, we have all sorts of different authors, and it's lovely to see so many familiar faces here, because I haven't been here for a couple of months. And without further ado, can I welcome our authors today? Are you right to left, I suppose, depends which way you're sitting. At the end we have Geoff Major, then Roshan Pitteea.
Pitteea, yeah.
Hey, I got his name right, fantastic.
Always good start.
I try. And at the end is John Saxton, who some of you may know for writing his children's books. But as his venture into crime, he has renamed himself, and his crime books are under the name John Saxton. So, now to start with, as we often do, I'm going to ask each author to introduce their book. They've all got them there. Tell us a little bit about them, and maybe read a short extract. So if I could start with you, Geoff, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. My third book is called The Debt. It's part of a trilogy, but it is written in a way that you can read it as a standalone story as well. In my allotted 4 minutes, or 3 minutes and 27 seconds left, let me read you the blurb. Let me give you a little bit of context, and then I'll read some from in the book as well. So the blurb on the back is, Mike McCleary is offered a fantastic new job. With his beautiful new girlfriend by his side, he can move back to England and be closer to his loving and supporting parents. Newly promoted Detective Inspector Steve Denton is basking in the spotlight after stopping a serial killer's nationwide campaign and feel he's finally getting some deserved recognition. The broker continues to evade the long arm of the law and is about to invest in a new criminal venture with the opportunity to turn billions. But not all dreams come true, and some can turn into nightmares. Now, the theme throughout this, whilst there is cybercrime in here, it's not a techie book. It's primarily about a very sophisticated blackmail scheme. So without further ado, I'm just going to read part of the first chapter. The teenager was starting to tire, but the three men chasing her were getting closer. Her lungs felt like they were going to burst, and the lactic acid in her thighs began to burn, but she'd been lucky to escape and had no intention of letting them catch her again. They had held a knife to her throat when they dragged her into a derelict warehouse near the club she had worked in, and the taste of blood in her mouth reminded her just how savage and unforgiving they'd been. As she turned a corner, she could see a car sat at some temporary traffic lights. She pushed herself harder and screamed at the top of her voice for the driver to help. The streetlights had been unable to penetrate the damp mist that hung in the air that night, so the driver had been concentrating on the road. It was thankfully clearing now, and as he pulled up at some temporary traffic lights, the music on the radio, Mussorgsky's Night on the Bare Mountain, was building to a crescendo. His wife wasn't in the car, so he allowed himself the joy of turning up the volume until the dashboard vibrated with the bass tones, and he was now enveloped in the music. He hadn't seen the teenager, nor could he hear her shouting as she raced towards him, her face contorted in both fear and hope. The first he knew was when she slammed into the side of the car, hammering on the roof and window. His heart jumped and he stared at her wide-eyed. She pleaded with him to unlock the door and let her in, as she pulled repeatedly the door handle. Please, please, she implored. They're coming. Hurry. The driver hesitated, startled and unsure what to do. Who was she? And why was she imploring him to let her into his car? Then his peripheral vision caught sight of the three burly men running towards them. He glanced at her and then back at the men who were now less than 200 meters away. She became increasingly frantic as they thundered towards her, and he thought he could see a knife in the hand of one of them. Get in, he instinctively shouted, as the central locking on the door clicked open. She pulled at the door, but her fingers slipped before she grasped the handle and pulled again, crying out in panic. This time, the door opened and she jumped in, slamming the door shut. Drive, she shrieked. With the temporary traffic light still showing red and a vehicle heading towards them from the opposite direction, there was a split-second hesitation before the man slammed the car into gear and jammed down on the accelerator. The tyres squealed and the car shot forwards, horn blaring to warn the oncoming car. The other driver honked back in anger, but as the cars closed on each other, the oncoming car swerved into a ditch where workmen had been laying a pipe. As they sped away, the girl looked back at the car in the ditch and then at the men who'd been chasing her. She sighed in relief, turned to face forward and closed her eyes as she whispered a prayer of thanks. The three men came to a halt and watched as the car disappeared into the night, breathing hard from the chase. One of them retrieved his mobile phone and dialed the person who had recruited them. When the call was answered, he said, "She's in." Thank you, Branch.
Thank you. Roshan, something slightly different, I'm guessing.
Yeah, slightly different.
Are you going to put
I am on.
Yeah.
I'm on. Is that working?
Yeah, what?
No,
Yeah, that's it.
better.
You can hear it.
Really? I feel that's really close. Okay. Oh, well, thank you. It's lovely to be here. My name's Roshan Pitteea. I write crime fiction also. My day job, I am actually a serving police officer, so I'm a detective sergeant. I currently work in a child protection team. Previous to that, I was a social worker, so I've essentially joined the dark side now, but some would say that this is just social work with handcuffs, so there we go.
Probably.
So I'm going to read to you a little bit from my second book. It's a sequel to Care and Control, which is my first novel. Care and Control is more about child sexual exploitation, whereas The Voodoo Room, which is a follow-on from it, covering some of the continuing sort of main character arcs, but a different crime plot line. So the crime plot line within this is around domestic abuse, controlling coercive behaviour, and basically how someone uses a person's spiritual beliefs to abuse them. So I'm going to borrow your idea with pride and just read a bit from the blurb at the back and then launch into a little bit from one of the chapters. So PC Louis Mortimer's new posting to the child safeguarding team thrusts him into his most disturbing case yet. A little girl who confides in him about a monstrous red mane figure that terrorises her at night. With DC Sabine Hussain at his side, Louis unearths a chilling world full of coercion, folklore and fear behind a seemingly respectable Mauritian family. Haunted by a sadistic predator from his past and juggling a fragile relationship, Louis must navigate lies, superstition and danger to uncover the truth. Place. Sarah looked up from her sketchpad, distracted by the giggles coming from Remy's bunk. Papa hadn't returned to collect their empty bowls. The sun had slowly faded, making way for night. The moon stretched its silvery fingers across the bedroom floor, only to be beaten back by the nightlight's glow. Sarah had quietly gotten herself and Remy ready for bed earlier, anxious not to incur Mama's wrath. She looked across at the tray with the bowls on, which sat on the desk opposite the bunk beds. Was it best to leave them there, hoping that Papa took them away before Mama realised? Or was it safer to take them down, wash them and put them away? Mama might think she and Remy had helped themselves, which would certainly result in unpleasant consequences. She licked her dry lips, ever so slightly resenting her earlier decision to give her apple juice to Remy because he'd been thirsty still. Sarah could have insisted that he went to drink from the bathroom tap, but that would have entailed her having to help him reach it. If Mama had thought they were messing around. Sarah swung her legs off the bed and sat up. She would go for a drink, check to see what had become of her parents, then make a decision about the bowls. Before she left the room, she climbed up 2 rungs of the ladder and peered into Remy's bed. He was laid on his side, curly hair awry and his brown eyes wide. When he saw her, he smiled serenely and waved slowly as he whispered, "Hi, Zara." "I'll dormi," she whispered, reaching out to stroke his cheek. He was hot to touch and her hand came away wet with sweat. She lifted the covers off his top half, noting that his Spider-Man pyjamas also felt damp. She tested the sheets towards the middle of the mattress to make sure he hadn't wet himself and was relieved to find them dry. He was obviously just hot. The room didn't feel that warm to her, but she thought nothing more of it as she climbed back down. Sarah opened the bedroom door a crack and peeked out into the dark hallway. The television was on downstairs. Her parents' bedroom was open, the room itself in darkness. She proceeded cautiously down towards the bathroom, aiming her footsteps as close to where the skirting boards met the floor to minimise any creaking. She slipped into the bathroom, closed the door softly, then turned on the light. Once the door was bolted, Sarah breathed a heavy sigh. She leaned over the white porcelain sink, switched on the coal tap and cupped her hands underneath it. She gulped mouthfuls of water, slaking her thirst. As she stood back, she regarded herself in the mirror. Sarah had always found it strange that her eyes looked so different to those of her family's. Theirs were brown and hers were green. Papa joked that she'd inherited them from Mama's side of the family, the eyes of a longanise. Sarah leaned closer to the mirror and touched her left cheek. She could see the faintest of bruises from where Mama had slapped her the other day. She'd already contrived to blame it on fighting with Remy if any of the teachers asked, but none of them had. Poor Remy, she thought, always bearing the brunt of their mother's temper. He wasn't a bad boy, just so energetic and curious. Unlike her, he wasn't afraid to use his voice. She envied him that. Sarah took a few more mouthfuls of water, then wiped her mouth on the back of her hand. She didn't feel quite ready to leave the relative safety of the bathroom. Sighing, she moved over to the toilet, lowered her pyjama bottoms and sat down. As she waited to see if anything would happen, her eyes drifted up to the tight rectangular room. White tiles were broken up by a blue border that ran along the mid-line of the walls. Above the toilet was situated an outer wall, was a small window that was kept open to allow steam to escape. The white bath, which creaked whenever someone got in, was enclosed by a cream shower curtain. On impulse, Zara moved it aside so she could check there was nothing behind it. It didn't seem so irrational, she told herself, as her eyes drifted up to the loft hatch in the ceiling over the door. There were monsters in this house. Zara wiped herself, flushed the toilet and washed her hands. She hesitated a moment, gathering her courage before she shot the bolt back and went back out into the hallway. As she started down the stairs, she sensed something wasn't right. After a few more steps, she realised the front door was open. In the same split second, she spotted her bedroom door was ajar. Remy. Sarah rushed down the stairs. Beyond the front door, she could see that the gate was open, but Remy was nowhere to be seen. She tried not to panic as she hurried to the threshold of the living room door. The television was still on, but her parents were fast asleep on the sofas. She turned on her heel and pulled on her trainers quickly. If she could just get to Remy and bring him back inside, she'd be saving him from the beating of his life.
Do you want to use that? Ron, do you want to use this one?
Yeah.
That's fine.
So, that one? Yeah, that's
Yeah,
on.
that one definitely on.
Hello, everybody. So I'm the new kid on the block in terms of writing crime. Not to writing, I've written children's books before, but this is my first venture into crime. So for the last 12 months or so, I've been writing this one, which is called In Blood Stepped Deep, which might ring a bell to a famous Macbeth quote for some of you. It's a slight corruption of it, but it sounds great as a title, and it really, really fits for the book. So this is set in Pontefract, which is my local area. Is anybody familiar with that area? Yeah. And it develops a new team around a central character called D.I. Dan Sutton. And Dan's been relocated from Leeds, kind of under a cloud, but for an issue that was to do with his daughter and a drug dealer. So he took a step too far and became relocated into Pontefract, from the big city of Leeds, of course, to Pontefract, which is very much part of where I was born and brought up. So I'm going to cheat from the lads here and read the blurb as well. So the blurb goes as follows. The stage is set, the victims are chosen, the next act is murder. When D.I. Dan Sutton returns to Pontefract, the small Yorkshire town he once called home, he expects the slower pace of life to the one he left behind. He's soon proven wrong. When a charred and severed head is discovered at Pontefract Castle, at the end of a performance of Henry VI, Part 1, Sutton and his new colleague D.S. Fox are thrust centre stage into a case that is as grotesque as it is baffling. What appears to be a shocking one-off quickly spirals into something far darker when a second body emerges, revealing a horrifying connection to the first. Then a potential witness turns up dead. As Sutton follows every lead, from embittered critics to a secretive theatre director and a volatile local addict, the lines between performance and reality begin to blur. Everyone has something to hide. Everyone has a motive. And the deeper Sutton digs, the closer the truth cuts to home. Haunted by his recent past, tested by a team he barely knows, and pushed to the brink by a superior who seems determined to undermine him, Sutton discovers that in a small town, secrets don't stay hidden for long. So I'm just going to read the inciting incident. It's chapter 1. We don't meet the team just yet, but hopefully that gives you a little flavour, and there's plenty of information over there as well. Chapter 1. And this is seen from the killer's perspective and his first victim. Joseph Sledmeyer's senses were overwhelmed by darkness and nausea. His mind submerged in an abyss of black. A sickening taste soured his mouth. Something cut into his wrists and ankles as a monster headache pounded off the walls of his skull. Memories oozed into his groggy mind. He remembered leaving his office, stepping into the dimly lit street, locking the door, peering down at his phone to check messages, becoming aware of hurried footsteps approaching behind, then a sickening blow that rattled the back of his head. Adrenaline flooded his veins at that thought, and he became suddenly alert. Forcing his eyes open, he stared into the darkness. He tried to stand, but found himself fully restrained. The pain in his wrists and ankles surged through shredded nerves like slivers of glass. Panic overtook him. Something was bound tightly around his head, pressing into his cheeks and gagging his dry mouth. Heart punching against his ribs, he realised that something covered his eyes. He felt the sturdy chair beneath him. Heavy and obstinate. He tried to speak, but the wet rag prevented anything more than mumbles and moans. Footsteps approached. Sledmeyer drew in a short, sharp breath and held it. Rough hands tugged at the gag, pulling it downwards to rest beneath his flabby chin. He gasped for air like a drowning man, slurring a few syllables before managing to speak. Where am I? What's happening? His tongue was sticky, his mouth parched. Tilting his head to one side, he listened for a response which didn't come. Blindly, he turned his head from side to side, striving desperately to see something, anything, through the blindfold. The footsteps moved away. Wait, please, don't leave me. I have money. I can pay you. The steps abruptly stopped, and Sledmeyer felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps this was it. They want money. A heavy object was dragged across the floor. Something inside it sloshed noisily. And when it stopped, he heard the unscrewing of a cap and smelt the unspeakable reek of petrol. Hope turned to blind terror. Cold liquid splashed over his head and shoulders, drenching him from head to foot. Sledmeyer screamed like a small child, then blurted out, No, please let me go. Please don't burn. And he cut himself short as his own words echoed with the unthinkable, and he screamed again. A thud as the empty container dropped onto the hard floor. A pause. In the silence, Joseph Sledmeyer's breath came in heaving sobs. He sensed his captor moving behind him. Suddenly the blindfold was wrenched away, and as he blinked rapidly, Sledmeyer's world slid into focus. A large room, stone walls, high walls, a ceiling with banks of harsh strip lighting. Warehouse. A shadow fell across the floor from behind, growing gradually shorter as his assailant moved leisurely around to stand before him. Sledmeyer's red-streaked eyes widened as he saw the silver lighter and the thumb poised over the striking flint.
Thank you. They are all nasty, aren't they? I mean,
Very sensitive, really.
they keep telling me they're really sensitive. I'm not sure that I believe them, but it's really interesting, isn't it? And perhaps I can start with Geoff. Why do you think crime fiction is so popular when it's full of nasty things happening?
A couple of things, probably, from my perspective. One is we all like to try and solve a problem, and the crime fiction gives us an opportunity to get into a world that hopefully none of us ever experience in real life. I think the second thing is there's probably a little bit of a wicked thought in all of us. And as we read through crime fiction, maybe there's just that little bit of a, ooh, that's interesting. Ooh, that Mrs. Jones down the street. Ooh, I really like something to happen to her. Not that I'm suggesting you do anything. I was looking around Waterstones the other day in London. I was down there for a short break, and the amount of crime fiction, if you look across all the shelves, is just phenomenal. It would be interesting after the guys have spoken, actually, to find out from yourselves, why are you so interested in crime fiction? Are you all really dark and deep and twisted? Is that what it is?
I know some of them. I will not answer that. I will not answer that. Roshan.
I think for me, because I've worked in the sort of safeguarding field for probably 20 years now, and it never ceases to amaze me just how cruel people can be to each other. My team has an overall caseload of, we've probably got maybe 80 crimes each, and they range from really serious child neglect, so children being to the point of physical harm, they've been so badly neglected, through to really serious penetrative sexual offences against children of lots of different ages. And I guess there's an element for me of trying to help people understand some of the motivations behind it, but also the resilience of the victims as they process that trauma and find a way to move forward, but also the toll that it takes on the investigators and some of the decisions that whether it be police, social care, or other agencies have to make, which are often really complex, and often I feel don't get the best kind of showing in, like, say, soap operas and things like that. So I try to bring in like an element of procedural realism to my writing, and in a way, hopefully that kind of gives people a sense of reality. But I think being able to connect people like that to what actually happens kind of appeals, I think, because we all read these stories in the news because every day there's something, and I'm sure we all wonder, how has that happened? How was someone thought to do that? How is that person going to recover from that now? Where do we go from here? So that's my sort of take on it.
Thank you. John? We've got one between two. Yeah.
Yeah, so why do we write crime fiction? Well, I'm particularly interested in reading crime. I read a lot of crime. I'm very much into L.J. Ross, who's a Northumbrian lady who wrote the first one called Holy Island. And I was hooked after book one. I like the complex plots. I like the red herrings. I think in terms of our job as writers is to tell a story. And there is real story material in the crime genre. It's also, as Geoff said, having an interest in solving things. So we all like a puzzle. We all like to think, oh, we're one step ahead of the writer. Or I rarely am, because they're so good at what they do, and things that I watch on TV, I very rarely guess the correct outcome, because if you put your plot there correctly, the outcome's not going to be seen too far in advance. So we like that, and also I think we like to take a peek into the darker side of things as well. I think it's something that we know when it's within a book, it's a safe environment, it's fictionalized. Our job's to entertain, so sometimes we might shock as well, but hopefully we'll entertain and we'll keep you guessing until the end of the book. But also, I think certainly within mine as well, the setting is really important. It almost becomes one of the characters. So your characters need to live and breathe on the page. You get those as authentic as you can in any genre. But with crime fiction, you can kind of take it into all kinds of different alleyways. And as I think, Roshan's clearly and very eloquently explained, I think some of the horrors of the real world are probably far worse than some of the things that you'll read in any of our books. And it's a safe space to read about it. So yeah, to entertain, tell a story, and also give that little thrill of the roller coaster as well. When you get to the top and get that, I think I know who it is.
Thank you. And I like a lot of other people, I like reading crime, but I have to say for me, it's about things go wrong. The hero, the detective, or the private investigator, whoever he is, who's usually got lots of interesting flaws, far more than any one person can have, but somehow through hard work, good luck, they resolve the crime. And I think for me at least, reading crime fiction where, okay, all sorts of horrible things might have gone on, but at the end of the day, the world is put right. They may have a different view, these gentlemen. So, but I don't know if that's for other people as well. But John, you've just touched on it. What inspired you to actually change from children's books to crime?
Thank you. Yeah, so for 30 years, 33 and a half years, and a few days, I was a teacher. So I had a captive audience and I wrote for children. I really enjoyed that. My first sort of outlets into horror, into writing were horror stories. I wrote some short ghost and horror stories, which I got into the independent presses that were around at the time. Before the internet, we had a lot of what you might call zines. They were called zines, and they used to arrive in the post and were just stapled A4 bits of paper, but there were really good stories, and a lot of good authors came out of it. So I always had an interest in kind of excitement, the darker side, if you like. That made its way into the children's books as well, but also with humour. So I think you've got to balance the dark with the light, very much so, particularly when you're dealing with really sensitive subjects. It has to be spaced out. So in terms of why I went into writing, is I'm kind of semi-retired now. I still work weekends, marrying people. So if anybody needs to renew the vows, I'm your man.
Cheap rate, is it?
Mates rates, absolutely. And so I've got more time now to explore other genres, and it's very useful as a writer to challenge yourself in different areas. This is an area that I love to read. So there isn't one particular subsection of it that I like better than another. I like the dark, hard-hitting, gritty crime. I like the cozy crime. I just love it all. I just devour it all. So I thought, well, I'm going to have a try at this. I spoke to a few friends who are writers, and they say, yeah, why don't you give it a go if you're interested? And so the seed of an idea came out, because you always start with a what if question. Well, I do anyway, as a writer. What if? So what if somebody walks into the Sally Port in Pontefract Castle and finds a severed head swinging in the wind? What happens next? And how would the police deal with that? And so it's an interest, really. It's a passion. I've thoroughly enjoyed writing this one. The second one's underway, and so it's planned to be a series. And it's kind of now that I'm writing for the adult market again, and I can kind of now take take the safety net away. And because as a children's writer, there's a lot of things that you have to take into account before you go any further. But as a crime writer, you can kind of push it a little bit more. So I've had a whale of a time with that.
Roshan, is that on? Roshan, I think it's possible to say that you write from a lot of experience, both in the safeguarding world and in the police. But what actually inspired you to turn that into writing books? Apart from being a masochist, of course.
Yeah, I just figured
Why not?
didn't have enough, to do.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
yeah, I mean, for years and years, I've toyed with the idea of writing a book, and like I had the odd flashes of ideas, and 2023, I think I'm going back to now. I'd done some consulting with for a friend who was writing a crime fiction book, and I just really enjoyed the process. So I thought, you know what, I'm gonna do it. So I sort of sat down. I think it was about March time. It was just after my birthday, and then 2 weeks later, the first draft of Care and Control had exploded out of my head. I was literally insane for that 2 weeks, but it was just it felt quite cathartic in many ways, because I think it was at a time where the public services, particularly after COVID, particularly police and social care, were getting absolutely hammered. And true to say, we don't always get it right, but for me, my experience is I work with some absolute heroes who do some amazing things and will then go away. It'll be like nothing to them, and come back and do the same thing the next day without thinking of it. And I think it was just a way of sort of celebrating, the good work that people do, whether it be social workers, teachers, police officers, whatever, and giving a bit of an insider peek into the softer side of it as well. Whether you're on a patrol team or anything else, there's a camaraderie there and stuff that perhaps people don't see. In some of the dramas and even some of the realities. But yeah, once Care and Control had, as I say, literally exploded from my head, suddenly I've got all these characters in my head, and they've got more to do, more things to develop, and I just had to get straight on and write the sequel to it, and I'm just working on book 3 at the minute. So I think once you get started, it's really hard to stop. So yeah, that's me.
Geoff, please.
First of all, I'm quite disappointed. He's already told you his birthday's in March, and nobody got the diary out. So, for me, I used to read John Grisham, David Baldacci, Geoffrey Deaver on holiday. And 25 years ago, walking my children to primary school, I suddenly had an idea pop into my head. It stayed there for 20 odd years. And then 2019, I just decided, you know what, I'd really like to have a go at doing this. It's the John Grisham stuff. I think going back to what John was saying, you think you know who's done it. Oh, no, it's not them. Wait a minute, no. Now you know no, it's not them either. And that taking people on a journey really appealed. So working full time, I was self-employed, so I said to my then client, I want to drop down to 3 days a week. And I dedicated those 2 days to drafting my first book. And I loved the experience. And for me, the probably egotistical joy of seeing my little hardback on somebody's bookshelf was fantastic. And I loved that so much, so I then went on, did the second one, went on, just done the third one. I've got 2 more now that I want to write, and I'm trialing retirement, as in this is week 9. and I'm not very comfortable with a fixed income, so we'll see how it goes. But I've been so busy in retirement. I've spent one day writing in the last 9 weeks, so I really need to focus back on that. But yeah, it was just that inspiration that popped into my head 25 years ago from reading people like John Grisham on holiday.
Thank you. And it's quite interesting that all three of you write police procedures, if I can call them that, obviously from slightly different perspectives. Interestingly, Roshan, quick sort of thing. John and Geoff's main police characters are detectives and inspectors, whereas Roshan's is a lowly PC. So that's quite interesting. And of course you are in the police. So of course my next question has to be, and I'm looking at Roshan, so you might as well answer first. Oh, the sigh, things I make him do, it's so hard.
I know.
Do you identify with any of your characters? And I have started reading The Voodoo Room. You have to do, yeah.
What my client meant to say was...
No comment. Yeah, I feel like there's bits of all the main characters that I identify in. You know, some people tell me, "Oh, I see a bit of you in Louis, the main detective," or you know, one of the social work characters, or you know, bits and bobs of me, I suppose, dotted everywhere, like little Easter eggs. I think though that particularly when you are writing a series involving the same roster of characters, it's hard not to get sort of emotionally attached to them and think quite deeply about them. You start to think about their background, what it is that's brought them to where they are now, and where they're going. So, as Sue rightly points out, Louis at the start of Care and Control is a PC. By the end of it, he's considering moving to train as a detective constable. That's where the juicy stuff happens. And yeah, there's something for me about being able to bring out, you know, someone's journey and development, and you know, bringing some of the characters from the original book into the sequel to show how they arc and how they process the trauma that's happened to them, how it impacts them in different ways, I think is appealing as well. So yeah.
Thank you. John, would you like to?
So what was the question again? Roshan put me off.
Oh, wow. Do you identify? Oh, sorry, can I borrow that for a second?
I was just stalling, so good.
Can't get the stuff, it's all right. The question was, do you identify with any of the characters, good or bad?
All the good ones, of course. No, the lead character, D.I. Dan Sutton, probably has a little bit of meaning, but going on just to echo a little bit of what Roshan was saying, I think you can't write without putting a little bit of yourself into the characters. There has to be a little bit of your own self. It's gonna bleed in somewhere into the characters of the fictional characters in the book, but also not just yourself, but people that I see now, you know, gathered here today could appear in a book. You could be a victim, you could be a suspect, because we're on the go all the time. We're looking all the time, and it's that's the writer's job. It's to look at life, be a people watcher, listen to how people speak, pick up on that, and then feed that into the characters that you develop, because your characters need to be three-dimensional. Otherwise, pretty quickly, somebody will read the first few pages and go, that's not working for me. These are very cliched. So perhaps Dan, the lead character, has got a little bit more of me in him, in terms of he was born in the same town as I was. He was brought up in the same area. And one of the not the golden rule, but one of the earliest pieces of advice is write about something you know about. So I know about the local area. I know about the local people. Back in the day when I was growing up, we had a village bobby, you know, the sergeant, and you just didn't mess with him, you know. So you knew the police, and I think, you know, that things have altered and evolved, and so he's got a bit of me. He had a bit of a wayward past. Anything that I did in my youth will will remain with me. But he's like me, right, magnified by a lot to make him work as a character. And then you've got to build your other characters around as well. So I wanted to have contrasting characters. His new team includes 2 detective constables, his detective sergeant, and DCI Flint, who's the pain in his neck, who is overseeing his transition from Leeds to Pontefract, and really would rather not have Sutton around at all. But at the heart of it, Sutton is a good copper who gets things done, and he believes in right and wrong, and that's where his backstory feeds into it as well. Yeah.
Thank you. And Geoff, please.
I have to say no. I don't think there's any of me knowingly in any of the characters, but I do think, but to John's point in particular, building a character and giving them that 3D personality is really important. I don't spend a lot of time plotting out who the characters are. I tend to have an image in my head. So, for example, there's a character called Stella Kendrick in book 2, Hell Hath No Fury. And as soon as I started to write her, I pictured Helen Mirren acting the role, and that then took me forward. I know some people, many of you will probably know Catherine Yaffe, who's written 6-7 books, all crime fiction. I know sometimes she goes into a tremendous amount of detail, building up that character in her head. She was talking about the main character, trying to think of the surname, D.I. Ziggy, somebody or other in the book. Thank you. And she was telling me she's got 7 pages of A4 where she's asked questions about, so what would Ziggy like? What films would he like? What food would he eat? And she's got that character firmly inside her. But again, I don't think any of it reflects her.
Thank you. It does vary, doesn't it? I mean, I wrote one book based on 5 ladies I actually knew. As they got more outrageous, I thought they took a life of their own. You know, you start with, it's the old thing, isn't it? You often start with what you know, and then you let your characters go off in all sorts of interesting directions. Moving on, and Geoff, if you've still got the microphone.
I was just going to say,
Roshan, sorry.
I think there's something about, you start off with an idea and there may be grains of yourself or your experience in there, but I think, for me anyway, like the characters take on a life of their own and they don't always do what I want them to do. And I think that's a sign that they've kind of come into their own. I think that's the way.
It's quite a weird feeling, isn't it? When they start talking to you and arguing with you,
Yes.
And say, no, you can't do that because that is totally not what we are. It sounds really
100%.
bizarre, but those who are writers in the audience, and I'm guessing you all do, that's when you know that your character's going to work, when you can see them that clearly and they talk to you.
I think there's a medical definition of what you described. So,
I think there's lots of medical description of what I've described, but perhaps we could argue that all authors are slightly bonkers like that.
guess my vote.
Thank you. And I'm conscious of time, but I'd just like to ask briefly for each of you, and Geoff, you've got the microphone, so that's a good start. What are the biggest challenges when researching the background for a story? Or perhaps you found it easy?
So from my perspective, I think time, obviously, having the time to do enough research, because I've been quite fortunate in that from the police side, I've got an ex-PC who advises me when I'm talking rubbish. From the psychological side, there's a lady called Dr. Catherine Nibbs, and she talks me through trauma and psychology, both from victims as well as from those instigating. A guy called Gary Hibbard, whose name appears in 2 of the books, talks to me all about cybercrime, etc. Simple things like, for those of you who either do or know people who use Facebook, there's a very common scam technique where somebody will post a question saying, tell me what year you were born in without telling me what the year was. And actually, That could be somebody innocently asking a question, but it's also a very typical scam routine for someone to find out what your year of birth is. Because an awful lot of people, for example, on Facebook, also celebrate their birthday by saying it's my birthday today. Now you get somebody's birthday, you find out what city they live in, and a few other pieces of information, and that scammer has got pure gold on you. So doing that kind of research for me is fun, but it takes time. And for some people that I don't know very well, so a guy who helped him with the debt and told me about shell companies, I proactively said to him, look, if you've got half an hour to spend with me, I'll donate £50 to the charity of your choice. And immediately he just said yes. But getting time when you're full-time working and getting their time when you're not their highest priority can be a bit of a challenge.
Thank you. Roshan?
I think the biggest challenge for me is doing the research and not getting professional standards, questioning why I'm researching how much Rohypnol you can give a child.
I would be really interested afterwards, because I'm writing a book. I need to suffocate 2 children without them actually dying. So can I have a chat with you afterwards?
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
you can.
You'd come in useful.
There you go. It's not been a wasted trip.
Absolutely not.
I think I try and write crime plot lines that I've had some knowledge of investigating, and that for me just helps in terms of authenticity. So I can't wait to do my stint with the Murder Squad, so I can maybe write a murder down the line. But I'm quite fortunate because I've worked in social work. I've worked in children's homes, as I say, now working as a detective. So I've got the kind of procedural knowledge, which really helps. I think sometimes, like researching practical stuff, like drugs, like mental illness, for example, takes a bit. But fortunately now we with the internet and knowledgeable friends, it does make it a lot easier. I think sometimes the hardest is actually getting into the headspace of, say, a villain, to be able to write from their perspective. But again, on a good day, it comes.
On a good day. John?
Thank you. Yeah, so research is really important, particularly within the crime genre, in any genre really. So anybody could pick this book up, and it could be in any walk of life. It might be a serving police officer that picks it up and goes, actually, you got that little bit wrong there. So it's making sure that you get the groundwork right, whether it's researching the police procedure. Gentleman on my right helped me out a little bit with that. I just appeared in his inbox unbidden one day, and he was lovely, thank you. Or if it's, as you said, getting into the headspace of a villain, or making sure that your Google history has at the start of it, I'm writing a story. So for a story, how long does it take a body to decompose underwater? Otherwise the Google police might be all over it. It's getting that right. Sometimes you've got to be a little bit cheeky as a writer and ask. If you don't ask, you don't get. I went to a police dog training event the other week, and there were all kinds of displays on there. There were dog handlers. There was the drone handler who'd been on the TV show. I can't remember the name of it, but it features car chases and drones. Interceptors. Yeah, it was the gentleman from there. Thanks, Roshan. And there was the scenes of crime people there. So I went and spoke to them and said, look, I'm a writer. I'm a crime writer. I've just written my first one. I'm working on a second one. In terms of getting forensic details, is it all right if I take your details? And they're more than happy to help. I'll give you, obviously a contact through the police. So I've got contacts through there. I bought books on it, researched it, and then the storytelling comes in. Once you've got the groundwork right, and you know what you want to say, getting that right is the key to it all, because then the story, I think Roshan summed it up there with, it kind of splurges out of your head. That first draft, what we sometimes call a mucky draft, it appears on the page, and then the real writing begins. After that, you start to tweak it, fine tune it, get other eyes on it. So getting the research right, and it can be fun as well. I found it fun anyway. And having a background in teaching, certainly towards the end of my career, I was dealing with more outer agencies than I ever had in the early part of my career, such as social workers. So this kind of linking to other agencies was already a little bit embedded in there as well.
Okay, thank you. And my final question for this afternoon for the three of you is, does crime ever pay? And I will pass you, as John sitting on my right, I will pass you to John.
Okay. So does crime ever pay? That's a leading question, isn't it? Unfortunately, it appears to do, doesn't it? Sometimes when you read the news and you look at some of the things that people are getting away with and making a lot of money out of, crime certainly does seem to pay, and the detection of it and the clamping down on it seems to be a never-ending catch-up game as the villains and the detectives become more and more advanced with what they're doing, particularly with technology. In terms of the life of a crime writer, this has just been out only 1 week, so it only came out last week. So this is my first step out into the public with it. It is available on Amazon, and it's sold a few copies on Amazon already. Not enough to retire on yet, fully on. So you can still get married with me if you so desire.
Get married with you? Are you
No,
proposing to the ladies in the audience?
I have married more people that you can shake a stick at. And none of it was bigamy, I can tell you that now, none of it was bigamy. And that's not the driving influence as a writer. The driving influence as a writer is to do things like this, to talk to people, to engage with readers, because you are the people then that will hopefully spread the word. There are very, very few writers who actually make a lot of money out of it. So it's not about that. Certainly for me, it's about the adventure. It's the joy of writing. I remember what I went into writing for in the very first place. It's because I loved it. I enjoy telling stories. And at the heart of it, sometimes when it gets tough, when you're in the middle of a really tricky edit, remind yourself what you went into it for. And it's to entertain and because you enjoy it.
Thank you.
I too have not sold enough books to retire.
Oh.
So after I finish here, I'm going to go and do a late shift. But that's fine. That's fine. I think there's a tricky balance to be had because crime, we don't always get the neat ending that we would like. And sometimes there isn't such a thing as a neat ending. Just because someone's convicted of a crime, it doesn't take away the impact that it's had on the victim, the community, all the rest of it. So that's something that I try and draw out a little bit in my writing as well. But you need also to have some kind of conclusion, some sort of triumph to kind of, I guess, let the reader feel good about what they've read and a sense of justice. So yeah, that's an interesting balance for me that I try and get in my books.
Geoff, please.
I've just sold my 10 millionth copy, so I don't know. For me, it's a hobby. I think it will always remain a hobby. There are so many writers out, and even these guys are very talented at what they do. So I take the joy from that. God forbid I would ever have to pay my mortgage by selling enough books. But it would take the joy out of it for me. I hope that I can cover my basic costs. So as a self-published author, that costs £800 to get published, and then you've got to pay on top of that to get copies printed. Amazon is fairly unforgiving in terms of how much profit it will share with authors sometimes. But no, from that perspective, the payback for me is it gives me enjoyment, it takes me away from the day job, and it gives me something to really look forward to. In terms of villains, absolutely, crime does pay for some of them, and they have to get away with it. I'll leave that there. Just come back to exactly your point. In real life, sadly, crime does either pay or is so attractive to some people. I think our job in here is to make the villains, certainly I try to make them strangely likable, but also despicable. But I know that this is fiction, and I could never do what you do. So, you know, hands down for the day job, sir. Absolutely.
Thank you very much. And I think probably for most independent writers, and there are a few here, it's not so much, we'd all like to be like J.K. Rowling, let's be honest, but it is the joy of producing your own book, seeing your own words in print, and actually occasionally picking one up and saying, oh, did I write that? That's pretty good. So as I bring this session to a close, has anybody got any questions for our authors, please?
I think there was an assumption that all the members of the audience are into reading crime fiction, and I'm afraid in that case I'm the exception. I find it very scary. Your writing is very convincing, and so was your reading of it. Do you have any advice as to how can one approach crime fiction and actually enjoy it, rather than find it scary?
Don't read scary books.
This is for me, I guess this is part of why cozy crime is so popular. It's not deep, it's not dark, it's not despicable. Richard Osman has clearly done a very good job with things like the Thursday Murder Club. Some people like to get into it that way because they can sit down with a nice cup of hot chocolate and a nice roaring fire and enjoy a little bit of I wonder who did it, without necessarily the petrol or anything else happening to victims.
Anybody else?
Are there artists in the here and now? Yeah. And how much do you use technology? Here and now, crime, I read lots of crime novels, but the use of mobile phones to allow contact between people seems to be a very important part of storytelling. Are you the same when you write your books about communicating with people?
Yeah, mine are based in the sort of, you know, the here and now, and within that technology, social media features. I think, again, it's just a way of kind of adding to that social commentary that comes from writing crime fiction, I guess, and giving it that contemporary feel. I'm not sure what you guys think.
I would just add to that, when writing a crime novel these days, I've never written one before, so I can't say it gets harder, but I think it is quite tricky in places because it's so difficult now to get away with murder. There are cameras everywhere, you know, so you've got to be very selective about why that camera might be out or why it might be on the blink, or where there might not be cameras before. You know, when I was researching where to leave a body in Pontefract Castle, I did speak to them and you know, spoke to them all about that. And I did have a camera featuring into it, but it was just a grainy image. So yeah, I think it's being aware of the technology, but I believe we're all contemporary settings. So those challenges, and again, of social media, technology, mobile phones, the whole thing, being able to track where someone is pretty much 24 hours of the day. I've got my phone there, it's got its location on, I know exactly where I am. I've got no objection to that. Perhaps a criminal would. Well, I would say that, wouldn't I?
Did you preface your inquiry to Pontefract Castle with, I'm writing a book and I would like to know?
Oh no, I will next time though, for sure.
Yes, very current. Book 3, The Debt, actually focuses quite heavily on what people can do nefariously with mobile phones. A couple of things. First of all, there was a criminal network. I'm going to read it in a second and remember what it's called. And they used to sell revised Android phones to criminals for £60,000, which could not be traced. They had automatic kill buttons on, so if somebody tried to enter the wrong code, it would wipe all the information from it. Around 2019, I think it was the French, the British, and one of the other police forces actually broke their code and therefore did a huge sweep of arrests based on drugs and murder, etc. And I think the other thing is, going back to John's point, how much information we don't know that we're sharing. whether it's you've got your mobile phone on so people can find out where you are, to even things like if you take a photograph with your mobile phone, the amount of data that that phone will capture about where you are, what's in that photograph, and a number of other pieces of metadata, and store it. So when people talk about big data, that's people like Google who are collecting all of this information while you're texting. Where are you texting from? If you're sending a photograph, as I say, what's the photograph of? Where were you when you took it? All that information starts to build pictures about you. So if you ever wonder why, if you've responded to something on Instagram, Instagram will monitor how long you hesitate to look at a photograph. If it goes over a certain threshold, they will then force feed you some more photographs and some more posts around that to see if that's something they can hook you with. If they can, they will use that data with retailers to make sure that they can target you for adverts. Asda 4 years ago made more money selling the data from customer loyalty cards than actually from selling groceries. More profit, I should say, not more money. £400 million they made selling the data about what you buy, when and where.
Thank you. I'm aware of time. Is there one brief question left, or are we done? Can I say thank you to our guests, Geoff Major, Roshan Pitteea, trying to get his name right, and John Clewett, and say thank you very much to them. Thank you.